Well, good morning to you. Sorry about the late start. We got the technical snafus out of the way, we think. It wasn't from our end. Trust me, it wasn't from our end. For once, it wasn't from our end. Hey, how about a Talking Baseball Australia Live? Baseball's best mate. Let's roll it in three, two, one. Let's get that open going. Here we go.
It's Talking Baseball Australia. It's baseball updates you'll really love. The MLB and ABL news you want. With Paul Morgan and Dan Vaughn. It's baseball's best mate all year round. From the batter's box to the mound.
And here we are. Paul will be joining me in a moment. It's not our fault today, trust me. Well, that's what I usually say, right? When it is our fault, but this time it wasn't our fault. BeLive had an issue where they were, for the last, really, I didn't realize this, like apparently part of the afternoon, I was locked and loaded. We were kind of scrambling, trying for a backup source. Paul will be along in a moment. We've already chatted a bit, but he'll be able to come back in just a moment. As a matter of fact, I will put the link up there, partner, just in case you don't have it on the screen for you. I will do that for you and send it right there. Glad you're along. Talking Baseball Australia Live, baseball's best mate. We are your source for baseball talk with an Australian, not my accent, but with an Australian point of view with Paul's accent. How about that? Week one, the big leagues, the books, it's behind us. We are now in week two, starting today. We'll talk a bit about that. We're going to break down, because I know it's confusing. And we're going to chat back and forth a bit because I know there's some confusion, but there is major news in North America regarding the Major League All-Star Game. I'm going to see if I can sort of at least give you guys an update of what's going on, because especially in the Australian point of view, you folks in North America, you probably know most of this, but you folks in Australia may not. And Paul and I will go back and forth. I want to get a little insight from him once I tell the story, what he thinks might be a comparison, because I don't know if there's one in Australian sport this has happened. A bit about that, some news and notes in the league. Also, I'm going to take you a little bit of behind the scenes. I was at opening day in front of a sellout crowd at Globe Life Field on Monday. It was the largest sporting event since the pandemic began worldwide. Pretty awesome. Ethan, good to see you. Brian, good to see you. Paul, when you get a chance, just fire back on. There he is. He's ready to join me right now. I'll bring him on as he is. We've fight through this whole thing. Wasn't our fault today, I promise. It wasn't our fault. It wasn't our fault. Back and going, bud. How you doing, man?
It's like the old Michael. Michael, you're there. It's been one of those days, DB.
It's been one of those days. To tell that story, back in the day, we were on Sport FM there in Perth, and Michael Ullman was joining us via phone. And the wonky buttons were a little on the console were a little funky, and I think I hung up on him twice. And we were, Michael, you're there, Michael, on the air. And so from now on, whenever Paul and I have technical meltdowns, which happens about every week, it's always, Michael, you're there, Michael, you're there. So
it is. But
how was your opening? Go ahead. Yeah, talking baseball. How was your opening week? How was your first week?
Well, it was good. Like, I think one of the hard parts in Australia on opening week, and certainly in April, a lot of day games in April. Obviously, it's still pretty cold in many parts of the US and no Canada at the moment. But so a lot of day games, which means a lot of 2 a.m. starts, a lot of missed baseball, so a lot of catches up on YouTube and things like that. I was just while we were waiting, I was just kind of checking out the Blue Jays and the Angels. So the Blue Jays hosting, starting their season down in Florida, because obviously the fiasco is still in the world with travel, etc. But no, interesting times. I think there's been some great highlights of the weeks, and some teams have come out surprising. Some teams have, but I think it's always hard. And I don't know if you think this as well, DV. It's always, you sort of get to that first week and you think, I'm not sure my team's looking so great, or that team's not, but it's such a tiny sample in an enormous season, but plenty of knee jerks in the first week.
Oh boy, I'd say it's knee jerk city, because everybody's got something good and bad. I mean, for example, I'll use my hometown of Dallas-Fort Worth. There was a lot of bad in the first series against Kansas City. and there was some good in this
A lot of
series. Went
good
over
in
your Blue
Toronto,
Jays, so you come out 500. So for a team that was supposed to be dreadful, that's about as good as you could probably ask for. It's always that way this first week, and I think you overemphasize the good. It's interesting to go back. Let's say 5 weeks, 6 weeks. What will we be talking about? We'll be talking about the Athletics and their dreadful start. We'll be talking about Baltimore and what a surprise they've been. And maybe Philly, what a nice start they've had. Houston went out west and lost one game. I mean, trash cans ablazing and all. I mean, what will that look like in 5 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks time? Will Shohei Ohtani be the star he's been this first week? I mean, this first week, it is a small sample size, but it's always interesting to see what sticks by 1st of June, middle of July, and we come back and revisit those things down the road. Yeah, it's good. It's good to have it back, though. And I know it's a lot of crazy times for you in the middle of the night, early mornings, catching up. With the time changes, and then as a fan in Australia, the time changes and things kind of get more May, June, it does get easier for you to follow them, the games over there, right?
Oh, look, it's great. I mean, even today, I mean, as I say, the Blue Jays game today, and typically they play in Perth at 7 o'clock. I mean, it's a 7 a.m. start, 7 start, which is great. Look, like you just put the headphones in at work and listen to the ball game. But you got your Dodgers games don't usually start until 10 a.m. here. I mean, you go into our friends in New Zealand. I mean, those Dodgers games aren't really starting until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Not bad.
So it's certainly it's certainly a lot easier to follow Major League Baseball than it is NFL, which vast majority of the games are 1 a.m. on a Sunday. But no, there's a lot of hot takes, Stevie. But at the same time, and good to see another ABL alumni getting a debut in the bigs.
Yes, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. I'm going to give you the question of the day real quickly here, folks, on TBA Live. Because we're going to have a lot of all-star talk. I'm going to try to make some sense of what's going on with Major League Baseball. But my question to you folks is, do you watch the all-star game? Is it a stop down for you? Is that something that you do in July? Do you set a date knowing the all-star game's a Tuesday night in July? Do you sit down, regardless if you're in North America, in Australia, on the surface of the sun, do you sit down, stop down to watch the All-Star game? And that's my question of the day. So I'd love to hear you guys' comments on that. And go ahead.
No, I was just going to say my thoughts on the All-Star game. It's like the NBA All-Star game. Like what's a bigger highlight in the NBA All-Star game? The dunk comp or the actual game? And I think with Major League Baseball, what's a bigger highlight? The home run derby or the game? I mean, for me, I'd prefer the dunk comp and the derby than the actual game, because the games are generally meh. Like they're just like, each pitcher gets one inning and kind of rolls them out, and it's like in the NBA or something, they don't really play defense, and it's like I think it's more about, for me, I'd watch the home run derby 100 times before I'd watch the game personally.
Although this year I think all the politics surrounding it are kind of gross. He says he will stop caring about the All-Star games are announced, not anti-All-Star. These things are silly, says Ethan. So Mom does too. I'm with you. You ask me right now, if you ask me, Dan, what are your All-Star memories? Well, one would be the 1995 game I went to when Texas hosted for the first time. That was a memory. It was my first time to be at the new Rangers ballpark. Number two, I went to 2009's game in St. Louis, and that was when Barack Obama threw out the first pitch, and it was Secret Service were frisking you down, all that. It was very, very security intensive, about an hour wait to get in the ballpark. I'll never forget that. And outside of that, there was one time when Julio Franco with the Texas Rangers was the MVP when I was in college, and that was a big deal. But outside of that, it's the Josh Hamilton home run derby that I remember. It's all the home run derbies. And I got to tell you, I kind of watch that celebrity softball nonsense sometimes too, to see if any of those celebrities get the ball. I mean, I'm more interested to see if Justin Bieber hit the ball in the ballpark than whoever. I mean, that's kind of more. It's the extra events for me And that's when I think of the memories. I couldn't tell you what happened last year. Or last year, I know what happened 2 years ago. I got no idea what the MVP was. I don't know who won. No idea. Don't care. I'm with you.
No. And look, I think the All-Star games in both, I think NBA and MLB are probably the biggest two. They're more sideshows for the city, and I think they're great for tourism. If you've got the All-Star game up in Kansas City or somewhere, well, obviously in Colorado, this up in Denver this year, but it's I think it's more about getting there. If you're going to make a trip there, there's a bunch of sideshows along the way. If you're in Dallas, who knows? Maybe Nolan Ryan's selling his sauce out the front of the ballpark and get a picture and some autographs. But I think it's more around that sideshow. It's a bit more of I suppose, less about the All-Star game, more about, I guess, the celebration of a festival of baseball, if you want.
Bob brings up a great one. I didn't see this one, but I know this story very well. It's the Pete Rose slamming into Ray Fosse at the Astrodome in Houston for a winning run in the All-Star game. And I'm trying to remember who hit that ball. Drawing a blank now because the guy who hit it was at one time, my first year, 93 with the Reds organization in A-ball, he was the roving hitting instructor. It was, God, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, Bob. Oh, I'll draw a blank. But whoever hit the ball that drove in that winning run was the roving hitting instructor for Cincinnati at the time. Of course, Pete Rose has was around that time where there was some talk about him coming out of the band and all that. I just don't remember. 3 errors by Douglas in 2000. See, I couldn't even tell you that. I kind of know he was an all-star, but I don't know anything more. I do remember watching an all-star game in Vegas with my brother, Sam, 15 years ago, only because we wanted to place bets at the sports book. I mean, that's it. But Jim Hickman, it was Jim Hickman. That's right. Jim Hickman was the roving hitting instructor for the Cincinnati Reds, and for that summer, then the summer later on in 1999 when the Reds were in Burlington, I got to spend a lot of time with him. I don't know if he's still with us anymore, but Jim, I'm pretty sure. Well, I know he's retired, but Jim Hickey, they called him, hit the base hit that Rose came around and knocked Ray Fosse never recovered. Basically, his career was pretty much shot from there. But that was a right. Thank you, Jim, for bailing me out there because I did not remember. Talking Baseball Australia Live, baseball's best mate, Dan Vaughn, Paul Morgan with you. I got the logo up there. Let's table that for a second. I want to give this headline. This is pretty big. Anytime a connection makes the big leagues, we need to go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and bring that up because you did mention that, and I think it's pretty important to mention that. This is a little cover video of Kevin Padlo. Tampa Bay, another Rays guy, makes the big leagues from the ABL, but made his debut against the Red Sox, went 0 for 2. But it's debut time. Anytime a guy with ABL connections makes a debut, pretty good story. He had a heck of a year in 16-17. 277, 22 RBIs and 2 home runs in those great Bandits clubs. Do you remember that? You saw him play. Good ball play.
Yeah, no, he was good. He was a really good ball player. That was the time just before the Heat took over the Tampa Bay Rays affiliation. They were affiliated with Brisbane for a fair while. So Padlo, did play a couple of seasons here. Always looked likely, and he was amongst a lot of good guys in that era in the ABL. So nice to see him go. And interesting, interesting that guys like Mike Brosseau got there quicker, Jake Fraley got there quicker. But good luck to him. He's as you said, DV. It's always a nice feather in the cap of the ABL when you can start seeing these guys go through the system and make the big leagues.
We're going to talk about Liam Hendriks in a few minutes, but of course Liam had a week. Lewis Thorpe. I do have this information. Okay, minor league camp, but he's actually with the holdover bunch, the bunch that's not. We call it the taxi squad last year. I don't know if they're really calling that this year, but he is on the 40-man still. Had a pretty decent spring, but he is basically next man up in that Twins bullpen. But I've not seen. The AAA roster did not have him on it. He was on the roster I'm calling it the taxi squad, which means he's basically major leaguer in waiting. So we didn't mention Lewis last week like I probably should have, and we need to keep following him. I think you're going to see him, especially out of the last couple outings he had in spring training. You should see him with the big club. They just got a lot of talent there, a lot of ways to crack. Okay. This is the one I would be remiss if we don't even discuss this. So I'm going to go and bring it up to y'all. All right, in case you've not heard this, if you're in North America, you've heard this. If you're in Australia, you've not heard this. You may have, you may not. Major League Baseball has decided to move the All-Star game for this summer. Of course, there was not one last summer. This mid-summer's classic from Atlanta to Denver, from Georgia to Colorado. There's a lot of questions surrounding that, and I'm going to try to walk right in the middle of the lane here because it's a political thing. It's a political football. Football baseball, it's called. That's what it is. It's a big, giant, inflatable, times a million inflatable baseball is what it is. And it's a political inflatable baseball. It's the largest one you can imagine. It's got folks from every walk of life, everybody chiming in. I have certain hot sports opinions on it, but I also, right in the middle, I see both sides. What basically, to explain this to you simply, is each state in the United States has voting laws, and most of them are things of nature like voting on Sundays, absentee ballots. When does that start? Are they by mail? Are they by a drop box? Where's that drop box located? Can you give snacks and water to folks in line on a hot day or a cold day? Can you give them coffee? Most states and most cities and municipalities have laws against campaigning in the picket line. You can't be standing in line. I can't be voting for election and have somebody walk up to me and say, "Hey, vote for me." You got to. There's an area, a buffer zone you got to stay away from. It's like, I think it's 30 meters, something like that, for the polling place. There's all kinds of rules each state has. And I will admit this country has had a very bad record overall in civil rights and in voting. This is a country that my grandmother's mother was not allowed to vote in. My grandmother who passed away in 2003, knew a time when women were not included in voting as well. Not to mention folks that are African-American descent as well. So there is some repercussions here in this country based upon some things that went on back in the day. Now, baseball, I think, is finally right or the wrong in 1947 with Jackie Robinson and finally integrating all of baseball, which, by the way, interesting story to note, when the Milwaukee Braves moved to Atlanta, one thing they had to do was integrate the ballpark and have integration in Atlanta, or the Major League Baseball club wouldn't go there. So there is some history there in Atlanta, a lot of that, and every state's different. Okay. So, but they're all basic laws. When you got to be so much old to vote, everything's different. Okay. But in general, most states have these rights in there. So what's happened is, to explain it, is that Major League Baseball, with some pressure from celebrities like LeBron James, some other political types, have come in and they do not like the new voting laws that were on the books that were passed in Georgia and the State House in Georgia a few weeks ago. Now, here's the deal. Major League Baseball is not out in front of this thing. They're way behind the curve. This is not something that went on all of a sudden one day we woke up. Oh, by the way, this has been talked about in Georgia and in other states. Voting laws change all the time. They've known that the Republicans who control, that's the party in power in Georgia, the State House and the governors, they knew back in the fall and back in September that these laws were probably going to get passed. So they had a chance back then to come up and be proactive, but they waited to the very end. So that's where all this thing's at right now. Now, I'm not going to debate what the laws are, because that's not, I can tell you can Google it, you can read it. It's not as bad as it seems, but it's not all the way good either. Okay. So that's the lay of the land we have here in the States. And so Major League Baseball, because sponsors are upset, some major sponsors are upset, and they decided to move this to Colorado, which actually doesn't differ that much from Georgia, but it seemed to be the safer choice. So that's the lay of the land there. I'm going to go back a couple of comments here. Major League Baseball screwed up, feeling sorry for Atlanta. Bob says politics, this is a North American perspective. Yes, and this is the whole thing. Politics dominate this issue. Quick decisions made without all. And yes, and let me emphasize again, I'm not telling you that Georgia is doing the right thing by their citizens, okay? And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not telling you they're doing the wrong thing by their citizens. I'm right down the middle saying there's probably a little bit on each side of the argument here. It's like any argument. There's a little bit of each, there's a little, somewhere the truth lies in the middle. It's not Jim Crow times 100 like the president said, but at the same time, there are things that need to be done. Now, I've been very I would say, put this way, out in front of racial reconciliation in this country. I'm a member of a couple of groups. We've been doing a lot of studies on these things, so I consider myself progressive in that department. But what you got to remember is Major League Baseball had a chance 4 months ago, 5 months ago, and waited until they felt like it was going to be a political nightmare for them. And I'll tell you where it all fell is where the social media folks have, social media has a lot of power now. It wasn't that powerful 10 years ago, but now they can, it used to be Major League Baseball players didn't say anything on social media. Now they're all social media experts. So that's the land. Partner, I'd love to get your feeling, because as an Australian, have you seen anything like this in Australian sport history where an all-star game or a featured event was moved because of a political football, or in this case, baseball?
I mean, the closest thing I can sort of think of, which is not really, necessarily in Australia, but I mean, I know that there was a lot of, pressure around, particularly South Africa, a long time ago with their sport involvement in Australia, whether it be cricket and rugby. There was a big sort of political movement not to bring in. There's been political issues with other countries coming in that have had certain issues in their countries, and the not so much to this level, but then I don't know enough about the voting system here is totally different once again to the voting system in the US. Like, number one, it's illegal not to vote here. If you don't vote, you get fined.
Right.
And like you have to tick your name off the ballot, and if you don't get there, you get fined. And it's open to everyone, which it is obviously now in the US as well. But Australia's had just as bad, if not worse, history than the US in a lot of the thing that we've done with the folks suppressing the women's rights to vote and Indigenous rights to vote. I mean, Australia's come a long way in reconciling its horrid past, obviously of a convict nation. And look, my worry with sports in general is like, you've got so many athletes now that are just like, their opinions are just so, I mean, and to be perfectly honest, I think, and I think even in the US, you probably like by the back end of last year, I think a lot of the US politics just started to just probably wear itself out on a lot of folk, and it was getting to the point of ridiculous here with the election and just the nonsense that I think a lot of it has now been sort of just gets avoided because not everyone's run out of steam to talk about now, but. Look, I think sports should be used as an opportunity to open a conversation. I don't think that should be used as an opportunity to, in my opinion, moving the All-Star game from Atlanta, and full disclosure, I don't actually know what the laws are in Georgia, so I'm not sure what they're actually fighting about, but I figure if it's there, there's an opportunity to fix it in Georgia, if it's there. I think by moving away, it is I felt this a little bit. I feel if you take it away and put it in Denver, all of a sudden, from the eyes of a foreigner, you're looking at Georgia going, Georgia must be like, without knowing enough about it, I look at Georgia now and go, boy, that must be like, pitchforks and Hickville that, like you get there. And if you're not, like, if you're not a certain type of person in Georgia, life ain't going to be good, which could be right, but I don't know. But I just feel like taking that away from Georgia, also takes away the opportunity to sort of, perhaps open up a dialogue and a discussion in the state of Georgia to maybe have everyone's concerns aired and fielded while they're in Georgia. But
yeah, and Atlanta's a city that had the Olympics in '96, and of course the Masters is going on this week in Augusta, Georgia. I want to piggyback what you said, and I've been involved with a group of men who are church-going men, and this is not a evangelical conversation, but I just want to show you what we believe. I go to predominantly white Anglo church in a northern part of the city of Dallas that is a little affluent. It's known as an affluent area. We've bonded with a group of predominantly African American men from a church in the southern sector. Dallas at one time in the 1960s was very segregated north and south. It's not that way anymore. It's Dallas in Texas is not that way anymore. But at one time, and my mom who's watching can tell you this, she remembers this in the early 60s when she moved here. But what I'm going to tell you is we've talked about this. When I'm at the game yesterday or Monday, I was sitting next to a brother and the son of one of the brothers, so a nephew. All three raised in Dallas, but they were all living in Alabama. To my left was a gentleman from Fort Worth with his son. It was 6, and they were all white. In front of me was a Hispanic family, a couple with a kid. Behind me was a huge dude. You'll see a picture in a minute in a big Yankees jersey, just big gut hanging over, big, kind of looked like he might be Italian. I don't know, but it had that look, the husky northern look. There were African American folks to my left. I mean, there was a really conglomerate group of people, a huge variety of people. I've been to Dallas Cowboy games where I don't know the person next to me, but I'm high-fiving them when the Cowboys score. I remember going and watching Nelson Cruz at the Grand Slam and the ALCS against the Tigers, and I'm high-fiving, hugging everybody, and they don't know who I'm hugging and who I'm high-fiving, as it didn't matter, because we're all cheering for the same thing. So I look at these things, and my church group is a great example, where there's like 9 of us or 10 of us. I think it's 6 black guys, 5 white guys. And we all want the same thing in our church, in our religious faith. We want the same thing. But look at it at a fan standpoint. If you're all out there at the Blue Jays game and you're cheering your brains out, you're so excited because the Blue Jays just walked it off, and you're high-fiving. It doesn't matter what the person next to you looks like, who they voted for, where they're from, what language they speak. None of that stuff matters, because sport, and Paul, what you say is right on. Sport can bring us all together. This game can bring us all together. And I am like you to a degree. I worry because you pulled the plug on it, the opportunity to let sport heal and let sport unite. And in this case, baseball heal and baseball unite was missed because you plug it up to Colorado where we think it's safer. But I can tell you right now, when I'm cheering for my favorite team, we're all the fans. It does. Do you not? Let me ask you this, and I know you're the same way. You follow St. Kilda, for example. St. Kilda does something great. You're high-fiving people around you. It doesn't matter who they are, correct? It doesn't matter. You're all St. Kilda folks, right?
Well, I mean, St. Kilda are gladly adhering to social distancing this year because they're doing nothing good. So you wouldn't be high-fiving anyway.
In a perfect year, though. You know what I'm saying? In a normal year is what I'm saying.
Yeah, look. I just think I agree. I just think sports are designed to bring communities together. I mean, that's the whole point of it. I mean, that's the whole reason people started, playing sports, was to bring groups of people together. I mean, that's the whole point of it. I mean, stadiums are now like central jewels of cities, and I think that's my only take on this. Is I just think that like you worry about, and I worry in general with sports now about the tail wagging the dog. And with that, it's, in terms of LeBron, as you said, LeBron James is very vocal. Of course, LeBron James is very tight with Nike. Nike is obviously now the jersey sponsor of Major League Baseball. If LeBron's upset, Nike are upset. If Nike's upset, MLB is upset. I mean, there's a whole thing that goes on. And, and as you said, the one tweet, one Instagram post, one Facebook post, and the whole thing is set on fire. And I think it's really hard for people to contain it when it goes up in flames. And everyone's got an opinion about everything. And I was just saying this to my wife the other day. I mean, the world, and I'm more talking from an Australian point of view, Australia is far from perfect. But to look at the world that my kids are growing up in now, even compared to the world that I grew up in now, and the more acceptance to, be it, sexuality, be it religion, be it race, the difference in, one generation is enormous. And I think we're not going to, I think we've got to allow, sports to play its traditional role, which, gets mass attention. And with that mass attention, you can send the right message.
Yeah, I agree, and again, that's where I'm coming from. And I want to kind of explain it for to the Australians watching. It's a confusing issue, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think I'm like you. I prefer my sports and politics separate. Again, I don't ever ask anybody who they voted for. I'm watching it, and I'm although here's an example. At that ball game, the guys I was talking to around me, I never once asked them who they voted for. Never once asked them their political affiliation. I mean, it was never covered. It was nothing like that at all. The closest thing we got to that was I was talking about the Monarchs. What a great story we had with the Monarchs. That was it in Kansas City, and that's been it. So anyway, I just wanted to give you guys a little behind the scenes because I think the first thing is the news. Major League Baseball do what they did. Number two, maybe a missed opportunity, and it's about opportunities. We talked about that before. This is an opportunity maybe to do something special. I don't know what you could have done, but instead they've done that. And which leads me to one more question, and I was going to save this for down the road show, but I'll kind of just bring it up, and we'll bring it up maybe next week. It's different now than it was 10 years ago. When Major League Baseball used to send out a PR person to each ball club and tell them, hey, don't tweet this, don't do that. They have these social media people to kind of tell ball players what to do. Well, now it's grown so much and by leaps and bounds that the players now have their own role. They're out there promoting whatever it is they want to promote, whether it be religion or be politics. The gloves are off now with social media. And I think that played a bigger part in all this a lot of people realize, because suddenly you've got Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines, two major companies based in Georgia who have many followers and many consumers who also are social media. And that big rolling, abominable snowball rolling down the hill was heading at Major League Baseball. They're like, we don't need this backlash. We're already third most popular sport in North America behind the NFL and the NBA. We don't need this. It's probably their own fault because they didn't get out in front of it back in October. So we'll get to that down the road. Anybody questions, comments, any of that? By the way, your questions and comments are here. Yes, Republicans buy Nike too. And people go to sports away from problems. I totally agree with you guys. I couldn't agree more. Some Major League knee jerks of the week. I'll just throw them out there. Oakland 1-6, but already 4.5 games back. Should you push a panic button? Are you buying and selling the Athletics, or do you care right now?
Well, I think they got to let it kind of play out for the next little while. But it's I don't know, like they they lost Marcus Semien to the Blue Jays. They lost Liam Hendricks to the White Sox. Like maybe they're not as good as what people thought. But I think 7 games in. Still 161 to go. So I think that'll be okay.
These are my top 3 knee jerks of the week, and 2 of them are from the same division. The other one is Houston Royals, despite the trash can barrage. They go to the West Coast, beat Oakland in 3, take 2 or 3 from the Halos, and get rained down with trash cans. Dusty Baker's upset because they're being mean to his team. We didn't get this last year, and I kind of thought at the time, and you and I talked about this a bit, we thought maybe it would die down because it was the first full season since that the trench can gate. But then we didn't have fans last year, so I guess the fans are going to get their. I guess the Astros 2 years removed and get the brunt of this whole thing now. I was a little surprised, but I think you're going to see more of that going forward this season.
Yeah, and I think probably guys like George Springer are probably happy they're off the team now. But the guys who have left Houston, but. Yeah, look, I think they'll cop a fair whack for a little while. It'll be interesting to see over a long, sustained period of time. If and I think as Houston go to different ballparks, I think each ballpark will try to up the ante, and each fan will try to up the ante on like you saw the blowing up trash cans in the Halos Stadium, and potentially I think it will get worse before it gets better. I think for the Astros.
And the final knee jerk, which is lead me to some discussions at the very end of the show, is a guy that we were waiting for this. Was it 2 years ago? Well, the 19 season. We thought we got hurt. Shohei Ohtani. We thought the Japanese phenom would come over and wreak havoc on the big leagues. He injury derailed that. But we've seen through week one, 2 home runs, hitting 300, and 7 strikeouts and 4 2/3. Are we seeing something special, or is this just a week one where just your mind is selling him?
No, I'm all in. I'm all in on Otani. I think Shohei Otani is like a couple of just short notes on him. The first, so he was the first starting pitcher this season to throw a ball over 100 mile an hour. He's one of his home runs. He hit first swing against the White Sox, had the exit velocity of 115 miles an hour, 450 bomb. And like you can't ignore those things. And also, like which I didn't know, but I thought it added as a fun fact. He was the last Angels starting pitcher with a hit in an American League game since Nolan Ryan in 1972. So apparently,
wow.
Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But I saw it on Twitter, so I'm saying
well, it's got to be right. It's got to be correct, right?
It's
correct.
got to be right. But
it's got to be right.
But no, I think. Look, I think he's so excited. And look, Shohei Otani, I think, is what Major League Baseball needs desperately. Like here's a guy who can throw 100 mile an hour, who can hit 450 home run, like and that bomb that he hit against the White Sox, that crack of the bat, his first pitch, fastball up, and he got all of it. And look, these are the kind of characters I think Major League Baseball desperately need, and he is the guy.
Yes.
For me, he is the guy that, boy, he can sell a lot of jerseys. He can get a lot of bums on seats, and he is, like he's got they call him Showtime. He's got everything going for him. I think he is such a critical character in Major League Baseball. Getting a bit more exciting and kind of growing as it's sort of trying to get out of the trenches of decline.
Bob asked about White Sox rookie Yermin Mercedes. Had a good week as well. And, his name came up. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I was going to just add in another good news story of the week as well, which was, the Baltimore Orioles seem to be bizarrely good, which is a complete shock in itself. But Trey Mancini, of course, got back into that team as well, who has come back from colon cancer as well. So got his first at bat back at Camden Yards, and great news story as well. But I haven't seen a lot about Mercedes though on the White Sox. I haven't watched much of the White Sox at all. So
I caught a little bit of their game 2 nights ago. He's 13-24, homers, 6 driven in so far, batting a measly .565. So take that for what you will, though. But we're talking Baseball Australia Live. We're baseball's best mate. My name's Dan Vaughn, my broadcast partner right there in Perth. In the beautiful West is Paul Morgan. I come to you from Dallas, Texas, in North America. Yes. And this is moving down the road. We're going to talk more about this, the social media aspect of the game and the future stars. I will just say this about Otani and about Tatis. I've not been this excited about individuals since I watched a young Junior Griffey with his cap on backwards taking BP. He was refreshing at the time. He was kind of outside the box. He was the kid. He was playing with his dad, who was wrapping up his career. I mean, I'm excited about a lot of individuals, young individuals, and this game is desperately seeking young individual blood, young new blood. And that's why we're going to talk more about that. There's a great piece, by the way, on ESPN.com about the bat flips, and I think now we're seeing that this game in North America, the way it's played, might need some of the pizzazz that's played in Korea, Japan, and in the Latin America. We need that. So anyway,
I will tell you something else, though, Davey. I will say something I think Major League Baseball needs to address. Well, not Major League Baseball, but if you're new coming into the game, I was only thinking this the other day because I was doing a lot of particularly radio channel jumping, just tuning into all games and this, that, and the other. And yes, I hope with Ethan, I hope Alex Wells does make his debut. I think something needs to be addressed with the broadcast situation, as in with the broadcasters situation in a lot of the baseball teams. You got your Bob Ueckers in Milwaukee who are quite engaging, but boy, if you're new to baseball, there is a lot of brutal broadcasters in the game that really are not not exciting at all. And I think there's an opportunity. I think I think baseball's a really tough game to get into if you haven't grown up with baseball or you don't know baseball really well. I will say that from just tuning into different broadcasts, and if I wasn't vestedly interested in baseball, and you could argue that you wouldn't watch it if you weren't vested interested, but
Sure.
it's just so interesting that, like, I mean, I like everyone, I watch a lot of different sports, but if you watch Formula One, for example, which do a really good job at explaining everything. Like, so you could have never watched Formula One in your life, and they will explain everything for you. And it's like, okay, cool. I mean, it's a little, obviously they're driving around a track and it's the fastest one to go past. Like, it's a little easy to figure out who's winning and losing. But I just find, like, yeah, there's just such a missed opportunity in these broadcasts as well, which just, I don't know.
I've watched the Formula One, and I've watched a little bit lately. I'm intrigued by it because the show is actually intriguing. In the presentation of Formula One's, the presentation of Formula One's intriguing. It intrigues me. I'm trying to learn more about the race, and I know you follow it. That's a great example. I will say this, and I'm going to toot our horn a bit here. We don't do this very often, but we will. One of the things I love about my job on the air with you and what we do with Talking Baseball Australia, what we do with the Perth Heat broadcast, is we try to educate while also entertaining. And that's why Simon Isons has been with us on the air, Ken McGee, Jason Hewitt, guys who could educate the fan and tell some stories and entertain at the same time. And we all try to do that, but also try to take the opportunity to educate folks. And we have to go about it as broadcasters that most of the folks in Australia who are tuning into us had never either played baseball, never seen baseball, or never been around baseball. And so we have to go about it. And I love that aspect. And I think we do a great job. I think you and I and our crew that we've put together over the years do a great job of entertaining, informing, and educating. And I think that's what's missing with this next group in North America, because you've got to be outside the box. You just can't just assume that we're all going to know what the guy that's been doing it for 100 years is, because not everybody's in that same boat. We're all coming from a different place. And I think the key for my goal with the Monarchs this summer is to be entertaining, informative, and also educate the best I can, whatever that may be. In the Monarchs case, I'll be trying to teach the story of the Monarchs from the 1920s to the 1960s. But that's going to be my goal. That's what I believe broadcasts should do. And we do a hell of a job doing it, partner. I really believe that.
And I just think that's the one thing in baseball that they just, and Lockie mentioned as well, like, what's a 12-6 breaking ball mean? There's so many.
Right.
But, and I go back to like Formula One, like every broadcast in Formula One, and it doesn't matter how many times you watch the broadcast, but they'll start off, the race, and they'll talk about the tires, the soft, medium, and hard compound tires, and then they'll talk about soft tires mean you go faster, medium, but they break down quicker, and blah blah blah. Like, they'll talk about every time about why the certain teams are choosing the certain tires, and they'll give you the explanation. And you could watch 5 Grand Prix, and you could probably, like, not be an expert, but you could really learn a lot. You could watch 25 games of baseball and probably still not understand why certain pitches are thrown in certain situations, and like why, like, okay, so you put the shift on, but what's the purpose of the shift? And if you have got the shift on, what's the pitcher trying to do? I just find a lot of baseball just gloss it over. And I think if you're new to the game, again, like, it is just, I just think it's such a difficult game to really fall for unless you've got an incredible amount of patience, because there's just not a good enough job done to explain the nuances of it.
And it also falls in the play-by-play man's voice to say, look, and I remember how many times I've asked Simon, hey, Simon, walk me through what you're thinking in this situation. You're a pitcher out there, you got runners in the corners, your fastball's not working. What are you thinking about? How are you going to get this guy out? I mean, those are things I want to hear about. The fan needs to hear what's going through the mind of someone in that situation, and not just having me just go, well, he's in a tough spot. Obviously he's in a tough spot, but I didn't tell you anything you didn't already know. But Simon, I'll use him as an example, or even Lockie. Lockie and you worked together this year. Lockie was able to do the very same thing in certain situations, talk about situations and educate because it is a complicated game. And Ethan, you're right. And that's the challenge. That's why I don't think people realize in the Australian Baseball League, and this is going to probably come off a little Dan the North American, you just don't turn the mic on and go to work. And the folks that do that and think you can just turn the mic on and broadcast a game are sadly mistaken. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of reading, a lot of preparation, a lot of sleep, a lot more preparation. It takes the times, like I told the story about when Greg Jelks was the hitting coach, just talking to Jelksy at the batting cage. I didn't write anything down. We just talked for 20, 30 minutes every day. And I soaked in all this knowledge. That's preparation. You just can't show up and say, well, I'm the broadcaster, I'm going to turn it on. You've got to prepare. And it ain't easy. And I love doing it. And I've got a season coming up, 100 plus games. I'm looking forward to it, but it ain't easy. And yes, it's hard to fill that time, but it's what you sign up for. And the real good ones sign up for it and do a hell of a job doing it. And I think we do that, partner. I love the conversations we have at the batting cage with Andy Kyle or with whoever. I love those conversations because we get so much from Bojo or from whoever, just chatting around the cage. That's part of it too. And also, it's not just memorizing stats, but also how can I translate that education and give it to our fans where they learn more and they do know what a 12-6 is now, or they're not, a backdoor slider. There's all these terms that broadcasters say. I heard about a dozen of them on the Ranger broadcast, and I know what they mean, but does the average Joe know what they mean? No. And that's part of it. So anyway, I was sure I got behind here. I want to show you guys what happened this week. Good stuff. We'll get right back to it as well, guys. Good morning to you from the hospital bed, Mr. Triso. You were the man. We last week we had our caps on backwards for you. My wife and I did. I want to show you guys 3 videos. This was worldwide news. I attended the first live sporting event that had crowds to capacity since the pandemic. So I'm going to give that to you. This is the first video here. And Paul, I'm going to pull you down for a moment when I play it. This is the first video, and I'm going to go ahead and just roll it right here. Now, not a Cotton Eye Joe here, but I'm going to show you all the fans. Look, all the fans out there. All right, you guys get the point there, right? You got the point. So there we go. That's something stretch. That's last Monday at Globe Life Field, and I don't know if you can hear me, the partner. Can you hear me still? You got me?
Yep.
Okay. It was. There was still a little. That was the 7th inning, so there had been a clearing out, and when they got some new club seats and all that, that's video number 1. It looked like a video game. It did look like a video game. Surprisingly. And my review down the road, we'll probably review it down the road, but surprisingly, that grass actually looked like real grass, even though it's the fake stuff. I want to give you guys one more here. This is actually pretty fun. This is what you do in Texas. There's a thing called Whataburger. Now, Whataburger is a regional fast food chain out of Texas. Actually, they have a ballpark in Corpus called Whataburger Park in Corpus, the AA home of the Astros. Whataburger is a legendary Texas fast food place. All good Texans know what Whataburger means. In-N-Out's for California, Whataburger's for Texas. This gentleman right here won Whataburger for a whole year, and this is the crowd reaction to that. This is just kind of fun. It's not as long as that video is, so let me give you that. As a former kind of reinvention fat kid, I was pretty jealous. This guy won One Whataburger for a whole year. Here it is, here, folks. This is Whataburger for a whole year.
Ivan is our winner. Before we give Ivan his free Whataburger, he gets to throw the bonus prize. He makes the bonus prize. Whataburger for an entire year. Section 239, receiving free Whataburger. Congratulations, Ivan.
There you go. The great Chuck
He's
Morgan,
pretty
yeah.
pumped about it as well. Isn't
Yeah, the great Chuck Morgan, the PA voice at the ballpark there. Yeah, pretty pumped about it. Again, that was pretty cool opening day. You got some sights and sounds there, and I'll play on a close today. I'll play God Bless America to see how that went. But again, you saw some folks with masks. You saw some without. When you were in the seating bowl, it didn't matter. I had a sunflower seeds and a beer, so I'm going like this. And so my mask was a gator down around my neck. But we're getting in the stadium, mask on, in the sitting bowl, mask are off. Some folks elected to keep them on. But I was part of a super spreader event. I don't know how it's going to work out for me, but so far, 4 days later, I'm feeling fine, partner. But still pretty cool. And I will say this too. It's the first time I felt any semblance of normalcy in over a year, because it was a full park, a line to get in, line to the concession stand. Everybody was waiting. It was a normal packed night. People were without masks. I was talking to folks next to me without wearing masks. The roof was, it felt normal, because the last time I was there, and we showed you those videos back in the fall, was during the playoffs. It was 12,000 folks there, but it was scattered out. You didn't really get a whole vibe there. The sound echo, but to be there and to see the fans up close and be a part of that, it's the first time I felt like this thing is turned the corner.
Yeah, it looked amazing. I mean, it was a great game and a great result in the end for the Blue Jays with a 6-1 win. But it did seem that. I mean, of course, like everything, it copped its fair sort of share of criticism. But but I can tell you, I mean, I went to like most like AFL football here. I mean, is relatively back to normal now, and it's a huge difference, and it just looked amazing. It looked exactly what baseball's supposed to look like to me, and it's just like, it was great. I'm all for it, as long as everyone is safe, and as long as it doesn't turn out to be 30,000 new cases of coronavirus in Dallas. I think it's yeah.
And here's the thing: I don't have videos of this, but afterwards, where we filmed last week, where we shot the show at Texas Live, that place was slammed. I mean, it was slammed. It was, of the 40,000, about half of them were in that one place. So, I mean, yeah, do I feel bad about it? No. Did I do something wrong? I don't think so. But, it's one of those deals where, it was a chance to live life for a few minutes, and I'm glad I did. And it was a great experience. But, yes, Talking Baseball Australia was at the first real sporting event. We accomplished another goal in our life. We're putting all these things on our wall there, buddy.
Look at us go. And now I must accomplish another thing, DV, and let you do the outro, because I must. The day has started here. I must get to the office.
Yes. Well, partner, I appreciate you as well. We'll see you next week, same time, same place.
Will do.
And you're the man. Sorry about the late start. We'll get it all worked out.
No,
and
get on it. Enjoy your week of baseball.
There he is, Paul Morgan, right there as we wrap things up, rounding third, heading for home. Let me get your comments quickly here. And I got one more thing to get to. Lockie made a great point about what punters watch for the first time. They don't know. It's exactly right. Pitch sequence can be explained a lot better. I agree. That's what I love about Simon Isons. I think he does a great job of that. Are the announcers too much like? That's a good point, Bob. I call it cookie cutter. There's a lot of cookie cutter out there. Every young announcer is taught the same things. They all want to be like Jim Nantz. They all want to be the same as Jim Nantz. That's the first thing. Or they want to be like, Joe Buck. But they're all taught the same things, same resumes, same cover letters. It's all the same styles. No one differs. And that's one reason I'm careful to who I send my demos to for critique because I don't want to be just generic Joe like everybody else. I don't mind having to be a little freelancing. I don't mind sometimes being a little too folksy. I don't mind sometimes telling a longer story than I needed to. I don't mind that because I don't want to be a robot, and there's a lot of that going on because I can tell you right now, when I hire young people to work for my staff, I hire them based on parameters, what kind of person they are, their values, certain things I feel in our conversation. I don't want to know how good of that they can do this and this social media skill. They send me their demos and their writing samples, and they're all pretty much the same. I figure if they've gotten that far and they send me something there, that they can do that part of it. What I want to know is what they can do for me in extra areas, whether it be on the air or whatever it is, just being good. And I think that those kind of people translate to become better broadcasters and better employees. If we're all the same, it does get boring. It does get robotic, and that's a problem we have. Because I can tell you, I've had job openings before where I've hired young people, and I can't tell one from another. I want people to tell me you don't sound like anybody else, or you do sound like somebody else. You sound like somebody like Harry Carey or Skip Carey or whoever. Chuck Morgan, the PA guy. I mean, whoever it is you sound like. I don't want to just sound like generic broadcaster. That's where I'm coming from. You're right. You can photograph 300 games and still understand the game. And Ethan, that's something we should probably do. I think a good guy to talk about that with would be Todd Van Stensel, and we'll reach out to him and see if we can get Van Stensel on this summer and chat a bit about pitching sequence. I think that'd be very interesting to talk about that. I think it'd be great to hear from Liam Hendriks as well. But we'll see if we can pull that out. Thank you very much, Mom. We try to do the best we can do for sure. Appreciate that. I mentioned that just playing catch up here. I want to get to something I said earlier that the did you know part of it, but I want to kind of get. You can hear me belting out the video. You heard in the background the video belting out, and it did look like a video game. But a lot of stuff I missed here. Full House baseball. It is something different. I'm going to be out there with you. First Heat game, I'll be there with you. Let's see here. Going to get caught up here. Okay, I'll get caught up in a moment. Here's some more. It's that time of the show. Now, Paul missed this because we're late, but it is. It's one of my favorite topics of the show. It's one of my favorite points of the show. It's a little educational segment we do. Now, we do one on the Monarchs Live, but this is one we do right here. Let me bring this up for you, and I will do this right here. It's our Did You Know segment of the show, and I'm going to give you a little something that has a little bit of a shout out to what we've been talking about today. So here we go. Bring that down for you here, folks. All right, did you know we're talking about Shohei Ohtani, a two-way player. Now, they don't happen very often. And but it's interesting to note that it does happen a lot more than you realize, but not where you think. First off, the last really well-known two-way player would have been Babe Ruth. He's probably the most famous one of all. Of course, Babe Ruth started, two-way player, eventually just stayed in the outfield, but most of his early part of his career, Ruth would pitch as a starter, play the outfield, was not uncommon. There were a handful of guys going back maybe late 50s, early 60s. Eddie O'Brien and Johnny O'Brien, a pair of brothers, were sort of two-way guys, but not officially, but they were tried. They were kind of flaming out at one position. They were tried as pitchers. Back in the 19th century, guys like Bob Carruthers, Tony Milan, Guy Hecker were all dual players. That was not uncommon back in 1888 or 1890 or in 1912. But again, the 50s, a few of them. Herb Duzak was another one of those guys. But two-way players, short times, but not full time. They were like a short experiment, and then for whatever reason, roster spot or whatever, it changed. And plus, we knew Otani was coming over to be a two-way guy. Now, I've mentioned this before when Otani came over, and I've talked about this a little bit over the course of time, that in collegiate baseball in North America, it's very common. Players are two-way players. I think of a guy named Brooks Kieschnick. He was a former first-round draft pick for the Cubs, basically flamed out as an outfielder, but did make the big leagues later on in his career as a pitcher, a short big league career. Kieschnick was an All-American at the University of Texas. I remember seeing him back in the 80s. He would hit 2 home runs a series and then close. He was a closer and closed 2 of the 3 games. I mean, he would come in the ballgame and close from the outfield. This guy was very talented. It's not uncommon in collegiate baseball, and I can tell you how many times I've written bios of players who are college stars, especially in small colleges, where they might have been closers or relievers, back-end guys who also played first base, third base, the outfield, and and it's not uncommon to see it in the collegiate game, to see two-way players, and with scholarship limits and the way they divvy up scholarships, that's free education to players. It's not uncommon. It's a very common practice. Not every school does it, but I would say in the Big 12, you probably got in the Pac-12, you probably got another half dozen. It's not uncommon. Small colleges especially, that yes, the collegiate ranks are littered with two-way players who will eventually become one-way players in the big leagues. But did you know that I had forgotten that, and to tell you guys that and share that with you. And one more note on the two-way player. When Otani came over in 2019, we'll discuss this a bit next week. I want to get Paul's reaction to this, but Major League Baseball has a two-way player rule. We'll go through that next week a little bit more in detail to kind of explain to you what that rule is. They had it in there for Otani. He got hurt, only played one way, but it's back in this year. What it does is it basically keeps pitching staffs or teams from manipulating the roster with a two-way player. You've got to carry so many pitchers, so many position players. We'll get to that next week. But that while big league baseball haven't seen the likes of Otani since Babe Ruth, basically, and you see a lot of guys flip positions. It's been very common for guys to flip positions. This is not a very common thing, except in college baseball. That is today's Did You Know? Wow, I didn't know that. Yippee, I taught you something, right? All right, I think you guys lost the audio, so I flipped the audio. Can you guys still hear me? Thumbs up. You can still hear me? You guys hear me? I think it says we lost the audio. Yeah, Kieschnick and Rick Ankiel's another one, another guy that was outfielder to pitcher, that's very common. But the other way around. By the way, if you're hearing me, give me a thumbs up. Somebody out there. Anybody got me? Thumbs up. So you're hearing me. Oh, good. Okay, you're hearing me. All right, I promised you guys to close with one more little thing too as well, and I'm going to get that loaded in the system for you here. Talking Baseball Australia Live, baseball's best mate. We're going to close this thing out, and I'm going to do it in the best way I think we can from opening day, if I can do it. Oh, okay, it's good now. Okay, good. All right, good. I flipped microphones. That may have been what it was. Okay, here we go. Let's see here. Let's see here. Recommending good books that can explain stats. I do understand most plays. It would be good to look over something visual. Yes. Let me pull out I can't get them all out here, but yes, I tell you what, Wendy, next week, join me next week. I will give you 5 baseball books I must have for the baseball aficionado, whether it be a beginner. I'll give you a beginning book, a kind of a Broaden Your Horizons book, and a couple of history books. Give me that next week, as I've got them here, but I will give you, as I can pull them out of my thing here, several of them. For example, this is one right here. Only the Ball Was White. That's a must read right there. There's others. There's a baseball thesaurus that I think is great. Tells you how many ways and how many words for how many names you can call a fan. I mean, things like that. So I'll get that to you guys next week. Let's see here. I'll do that for you next week. Anyway, all good. I'll see you all good. All right, cool. This was the God Bless America at the ballpark. Again, this is Talking Baseball Australia's field trip to Globe Life Field on Monday opening day, Texas versus Toronto. And here is the playing of God Bless America to close out the show with. Here we go. Let's get this for you.
God bless America.
God bless America, land that stand beside her and guide her. Light from above, from the mountains to the prairie, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
There you go. And you can hear me singing in the background, sort of. A couple things. Tim McCarver, yes, that's a good book. There are a lot of really good baseball books, and I've got dozens of them downstairs. The one I recommend is there is a Jesse Goldberg Schlosser is a young man who wrote a baseball thesaurus, which is really cool. What you can do is, let's say you hear the term 12 to 6, you can look it up what that means. It also gives you other written names for fans and peanuts and whatever. There's like 100 different words for the baseball that you may or may not have heard. There's a couple of almanacs as well out there that would be very good. I mean, and there are also some historical books. I think anything on Jackie Robinson, anything on integration is important. I think also baseball during the war years, whether it be World War I or World War II, are also very interesting. There's another book about Ted Williams and his war effort. It's very interesting as well. Also a neat book, I say neat, a great story. It's called The Catcher Was a Spy. It's a book about Mo Berg. He's he was a spy in the first CIA kind of operative, and also was a backup catcher in the big leagues. A very interesting character. Those are all on my list, but I'll get those to you next week, Wendy. I will make sure we get that. But thank you, Steve, for chiming in as well here on Talking Baseball Australia Live, baseball's best mate. Wraps it up for us this week. We're here on Twitter at TBA, at Talking Baseball Australia, and of course on Instagram. Of course, Paul Morgan and I both have our Twitter going and rocking and rolling. I encourage y'all too to follow the Kansas City Monarchs. Make them your official independent team in North America. The Kansas City Monarchs, as they'll be rolling in the American Association May 18th. Opening day against the Lincoln Salt Dogs. Be looking forward to having y'all do that. Another good thing, Bob, is the Ken Burns series is phenomenal. Ken Burns has done a lot of really good stuff. The Civil War series is phenomenal. The baseball series is great. As a matter of fact, Bob, I think I've shared this story before. I had a chance to sit next to him. He was doing, he did the baseball series, and then he came and was doing a follow-up couple episodes and kind of an ESPN follow-up. And I sat next to him at the old Ranger Park, probably 8 or 9, 10 years ago. And I'm sitting actually right behind him, and a seat off, but right behind me. And it was Ken Burns. And we had a nice chat about baseball and the archival footage. He told me that the archive, it took them a year to dig up that archival footage. Also, When It Was a Game is another really good, it's an HBO, I think it was a Showtime series. They took all this old video they found, or old film they found, and they've turned it into they narrated with different actors. It's a really good piece as well. It's a few years old. I think it was probably 2010 or 11, but it's got some really good old video and film from 1920s, 30s, the war years, all that. Those are all good pieces as well. Bob says go Railcats. We'll agree to disagree, Bob, but to look forward to seeing you. Hope you'll stop by when those mighty Monarchs come rolling through Gary, Indiana. When we come rolling through, I believe in June. I think that's right. Back next week, Thursday, again, we'll give you some books. Paul and I'll catch up with the news as well. We'll go through all this and just do what we're doing. Love to hear from you, your chats, your comments. By the way, when we're going on the air, you can go to our Facebook page and say, hey, get notified when we're on the air. Well, when you hear us go bing, you can just jump on. You'll hear the bing notification. Get the notification. And Mom, Bob's a good bloke. You don't worry, Mom. It's all good. But anyway, big thanks to Paul Morgan. A big thanks to you folks across Australia, across North America, across the world, watching us on replay on Talking Baseball Australia Live, baseball's best mate. My broadcast partner, Paul Morgan. I'm Dan Vaughn. Let's remember, let's be better tomorrow than we were today. Let's show more love tomorrow than we showed today. Let's get better and better and better. Let's be better fans and just be better people as we go forward. Virtual hugs, everybody. Look forward to seeing you at a ballpark around the corner, somewhere, someplace. It'll be in Australia or in America. Looking forward to it. And, of course, always follow us here on Talking Baseball Australia Live, baseball's best mates. That time again. Time to close. Let's roll it. 3, 2, 1. See you next week, everybody. Thanks for joining us. You guys are the best.
Buy me some peanuts and cracker jacks.